Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Matthew Nichols, and I manage the Google Cloud Security community. We are thrilled to have you all here for what promises to be an incredible, insightful session. Before we get started, I just wanted to share my sincere gratitude and thanks to everyone that has registered for this webinar and for your engagement in our community. It's because of you that we are successfully building this vibrant network of security practitioners. And this community is more than just a space. It's a place for us to learn and grow from each other's experiences using our tools. It's a safe environment for you to ask questions and where we can all help each other and learn from each other. It's truly becoming a hub for learning and thought leadership. And it's because of your active participation. That's precisely why we're able to bring you these valuable training sessions like these webinars today. And speaking of valuable training, in the fast-paced world of cybersecurity, efficiency and precision is paramount. So imagine having an intelligent partner that can dramatically enhance your threat detection and response capabilities. Well, today we're going to show you how that's becoming a reality. We're excited to introduce to you our very own Vasken Houdoverdov, Google Cloud Security's technical solutions consultant. Vasken is here to guide us through the groundbreaking ways Gemini can enhance your work in Google SecOps. And one quick note before I turn it over to Vasken, it's an admin item. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. We will get to as many questions as possible, but if we're not able to answer them, all of your questions will be in community, and we'll answer them as we post this webinar. So thanks again for joining. Vasken, it's great to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Matt, thanks so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar. And this is an exciting agenda that we have for everyone here, and I'm really excited to dive into it. By way of introduction, my name is Vasken. I work as a technical solutions consultant here at Google, and I work in a customer-facing role. So day in and day out, I work with customers across all different sectors, different industries, sometimes different countries. I love what I do. I work with a really talented group of people here at Google across different teams. There's a ton of collaboration, and I couldn't do it without the other folks that I work with, without Matt, without the community. So day in and day out, I help customers with configuration of Google SecOps and other tools under our portfolio. So for today, I want to focus more on how you can use Gemini to streamline the work that you do within Google SecOps. And so we have a pretty action-packed agenda here with a bunch of examples that we'll run through. It's really good to be here. And Matt, thank you again so much.
Yeah, really excited, Vasken. Let's turn it over to you and dive into what we're going to be looking at today.
Sure, sounds good. So here's our agenda that we have lined up here, and this is going to be a live demo for the entire thing. So once we switch through these slides, we're going to dive into Google SecOps, and we're going to work through the rest of our agenda here live and within the tool. So this will be a very brief as far as slides are concerned. We'll start off by talking a little bit about how Gemini fits into Google SecOps. What are some of the logistics related to how you can use it and its availability? We'll talk about some of the best practices and how you can actually leverage it to the utmost potential. We'll talk about how you can use Gemini to do various things within Google SecOps. So we'll hit multiple different use cases here. One of which will be, for example, researching threat intelligence, creating YARA rules, creating search queries with natural language. And we'll cover best practices and how we can create a feedback loop with Gemini. So for instance, when you, as you use Gemini throughout the course of your usage of Google SecOps, you can provide feedback that helps improve Gemini over time. So as we're working with AI and as we're using Gemini to solve pretty difficult use cases here within Google SecOps, it's reasonable that we need to create this feedback loop for to be able to keep improving Gemini and make it make it fit that use case. So we'll cover all of that in more detail here later on. So as far as logistics go, I wanted to cover just a few brief things about Gemini before we dive into it from a Google SecOps perspective. So within Google SecOps, Gemini powers multiple various features. So we'll hit on all of these here momentarily. So it's not one or two things that Gemini can do. It's a few, and there's a few different things that we'll see these in action here. In general, Gemini uses the SecLM platform. So one of the things that this entails is that Gemini is trained on what we call SecPalm, which is it's a type of model that's trained on security blogs, research papers, threat intel, various other sources that are all salient and relevant to threat researchers and personnel who are dealing with these threats within Google SecOps. So what does that mean to us? It means that Gemini, in the context of Google SecOps, is built upon a large corpus of security information, security documentation, threat intel, research papers. There's a wide variety of information that it has available to it, and it's going to help us with what I'm going to show here, which is called ATI, or Applied Threat Intelligence. So we have all of this different threat intel that exists out there, right? We want to be able to take this threat intelligence and have some kind of an actionable insight with it. And we'll talk about how this is done with Gemini. We need to be able to organize all of these different indicators of compromise that exist and be able to leverage them without having to manually copy them back and forth or collate the data. As far as availability goes, Gemini is available globally in Google SecOps. It doesn't matter where your SecOps instance is based, so it's available globally. And as far as routing the request goes, there's 3 regions that Gemini will route the request to. So depending on which one of these is the closest one, that's the one of these 3 that Gemini will actually handle the requests in. So high level, it's available globally in SecOps. And there's 3 regions in which we do the data processing. So these are the high level and logistical, sort of non-technical stuff that I wanted to cover for SecOps. Okay. With that in mind, I want to just dive in right into Google SecOps, and we'll start working through some of our use cases here. So let's do it. Okay, at this point, I'm now in the Google SecOps console. So I have a number of these queries pulled up here, and to save you the trouble of hearing my mechanical keyboard, I'll go ahead and copy and paste most of these queries here in our window. But before we do that, let's just look at this at a high level. So, for those that are already familiar with Google SecOps, you probably spend a considerable amount of time in this screen already, right? You might be an expert. This might be something that you spend a lot of your day in using Google SecOps. For those that don't, what I want to show you here is that this is the screen by which we navigate SIM searches in SecOps. This is the screen by which we can provide a search query and return events across our SecOps data. There's a number of different ways that you can interface with Gemini in Google SecOps, and I'll show you some of these ways. The most intuitive and the most straightforward way to do this is by opening what we call the Gemini pane, which is accessed by the icon right next to your avatar on the top right. So you can see the Gemini icon here right next to my name. So I'm going to go ahead and click that to open up, again, what we call the Gemini pane. This is one of a few different ways that you can interface with Gemini in SecOps. And so it's the one that's the most intuitive, and it's the one that makes it has the closest resemblance to having a chat with Gemini like you might already be doing in other contexts outside of SecOps. So after clicking the Gemini pane, I've now pulled up this sidebar here, which gives me a pathway to start interacting with Gemini. There's a number of different pre-made buttons here that I can click to provide me examples of these different queries that we can pass to Gemini. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, right, we decided we want to approach this from the perspective of ATI, or Applied Threat Intelligence. So instead of running maybe some more cookie cutter prompts here in Gemini, let's run one that's actually meaningful, and maybe the one that's related to a threat actor. So for those that are experienced security folks, and maybe you can appreciate something like this, which is, what if we're in a scenario where we want to determine whether or not there's some kind of an advanced persistent threat in our environment? For that matter, what if we want to determine that for a very specific APT? So the traditional way of doing this is, navigating threat intel and then correlating these IOCs, whether you correlate that manually or whether you have some other tool that does it for you. The general process here is that we're taking indicators of compromise and we're trying to determine whether they exist. Within SecOps, there's intelligent ways of doing this without, even without using Gemini. But what I want to show you here is how to actually leverage this to make it a little bit easier. So maybe you're already doing this in SecOps today, and maybe you haven't tried Gemini in that context. So I want to show you a little bit about how this looks. So if we put this in perspective here for a second, not only are we doing a live demo, but we're doing a live demo with AI. So in the event that we return some kind of a result that we don't expect, or Gemini it's providing a response that's not helpful, no worries. I'll show you how to navigate this type of stuff. So it happens with AI, and there's ways to sort of navigate these scenarios. So I'll show you in the event that we get something back that doesn't help us, or that we need to do a second pass on it. We'll work through that together. So no issues. I want to start with a single query here that I'm going to pass to Gemini, and it's a very short question, but for those that have experience with security, it's not a very easy question to answer. So the question that I'm about to paste to Gemini is APT43 active in my environment? I'll run this query, and it's going to take a second for it to come back. But let's put this in perspective, right? We're asking a fairly difficult question to Gemini right now. It's a short question, but it's a difficult question. Like if we were seasoned security professionals that are spending most or all of our day in Google SecOps, and we're intimately familiar with the environment that we're detecting, this might still take time for us to answer. If it was easy to tell if a threat actor is in your environment, it might not be an APT. So this is a difficult use case. What we're asking Gemini to do here is, it's not something where there's like a single place to check to see where we can confirm that this is actually the case or it's not the case. So let's scroll up to the top of the response from Gemini, and let's parse through it and see what we got back and how Gemini is helping us in this scenario. Again, the question that I just pitched it was, is APT43 an advanced persistent threat actor active in this environment? Okay, so the first thing that we're going to see that Gemini tells us is, I cannot definitively determine if APT43 is active in your environment. That's fine. In fact, we just mentioned this, right? I mean, this is a difficult enough use case to determine conclusively for like a human operator too, especially one that would be familiar with an environment. So the fact that Gemini is phrasing this this way at the beginning, that's fine. What we want here is not so much this definitive yes or no, but let's see what kind of tools are available to us, and what does Gemini make available to us in order to make this research and make that determination. Okay, so after telling us that it's not able to definitively tell if APT43 is in the environment, there's a number of other pieces of info that it gives us. So what we see here is it's building out like a taxonomy of this threat actor. We have a number of different characteristics of the threat actor, like for example, the geographic region that they're based in, the different types of technical capabilities that they have, the types of tactics that they might use, the types of industries that they target. This is all information that's available in threat intel, but which it might take several passes to find this stuff. Maybe some of it's easier to find than others, but Gemini is taking this threat intel data for us and it's consolidating it into one place. If we scroll down a bit further, we'll see some available like hashes that it knows. And more importantly here, not only does it give us a list of aliases that are associated with this threat actor, but it's telling us in the past 90 days, we found 16 indicators of compromise in your environment associated with these various synonyms that are affiliated with APT43. In some cases, they might just represent APT43 themselves. So let's take a step back and see what Gemini just did for us. So in order to make this determination that these 16 indicators of compromise actually exist in the environment, it had to have actually done some kind of a search, right? It had to have conducted some kind of a query that indicates that, hey, these domains were actually contacted, and here's the timestamps that they were contacted on. Somehow or another, it was able to correlate this data in actually a pretty short amount of time. So we got back these results fairly quickly. Even if we were to take this and translate it into the corresponding query and try to manually get this, it might take us some time. Even if we're familiar with SecOps, this might be something that takes, it might take a few minutes, it might take more, right? So Gemini is doing this work for us, where it's passing the query and it's telling us, all right, in this SecOps environment, even though I can't tell you definitively, yes, you're compromised by APT43, or no, you're not, there's these 16 indicators that are definitely associated with the threat actor. So after listing out the domains and their associated timestamps of when they were last seen, there's also a really useful button here that says, here's a search to help investigate. Before I click that button, just a quick aside, I want to show you that you can rate every response from Gemini. So for everything that comes back, you can either give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if you do select the thumbs down, you can provide a feedback for why the result is inaccurate, or why you felt that it was not an appropriate response for the question. When you do this, like this type of feedback makes it to us. So I just wanted to indicate that, if when you type something in here for the feedback, it makes it to us, and that feedback is going to be it'll be analyzed on our end. So with that being said, towards the bottom of the domain list, we now will have a button that says, here's a search to help us investigate. So my next step is going to be to click that button. Okay, so what do we now have? Presumably those associated domains and IPs that we just saw in our Gemini response are now being crafted into the associated query, the same one that Gemini just used to pull this information here. And what we noticed a second ago, that the Gemini summary that is towards the center of the screen was spinning, right? So while the search is in the process of returning its information, the case summary is going to be pending. Once all the events are returned and once the search query has ran its course, then the Gemini summary will populate. So this is another item that I'd like to cover here for as far as Gemini is concerned. This is yet another way that you can interface with Gemini within Google SecOps. So we switched from using the pane on the right-hand side where we typed our query to now we ran a search within Google SecOps. We didn't have to type any of this ourselves, right? All 100% of the search query was provided to us by Gemini. And the associated case summary populated once this search completed. From here on out, this is just the same like parsing out any other search that you might be looking at in SecOps. So we have the associated events, we have the associated alerts, okay, and we can work through this data. Again, even if Gemini is not going to make that conclusive determination for us that, hey, this actor is in your environment, or no, it's not, that's fine, because we now have the pieces that are in place to allow us to make that determination, right? As a security analyst or as a security engineer, we have that expertise and we know our environment. So when it comes to making that conclusive determination, it's okay if Gemini is not telling us at the onset yes or no. So we started off by running the query. We parsed out the result that Gemini gave us, which again, it was a summary of the threat actor, the different taxonomy associated with that threat actor, the different synonyms. And then it kicked off a search for us that indicated that there's X number of domain indicators of compromise that are available, that are present within this environment. And here's the search that allows you to run it. So in this case, since I was able to actually get a nice and nifty search, which returns some relevant results to me, I'll go ahead and rate this as a positive. And I might not have the permissions in this lab to actually rate so yeah, being able to submit the feedback is a separate permission role that you require in SecOps. And I'll show you in the docs later. I'll show you sort of the different permissions that are needed to make this happen. So in this case, I'm working with a lab here where I don't have that exact right to be able to make that the feedback loop, which it's fine. So we'll close this out at the end with some docs that include sort of like the permissions, etc., that are needed. So okay. The first query that we ran was is APT43 active environment in our environment. So let's run a few more queries and work through them. The next one I'm going to ask here is related to a different threat actor, and I'm phrasing this question a little bit differently. So instead of asking like if a threat actor is present in this environment, now I'm just asking this question of what is this threat actor, right? What is UNC 3782? So we'll run this as well, and we'll wait for the result to come back from Gemini. And again, you'll notice that this one's also going to take a second to come back, and there's a reason for that too, and we'll parse this out here momentarily. So the first one we looked at was APT43. Second one here is UNC 3782. Okay. Again, we'll see the same type of structure that we saw a second ago for APT43. So for instance, we'll see that taxonomy being built out here. We'll see kind of the associated characteristics of this threat group. We'll see some of the other indicators, like for example, it gives us an example of a few IOCs here, like URLs that might be associated with like a web shell potentially from the looks of it. Okay, and again, towards the bottom, we have this other bonus that Gemini did for us, right? So it did us a favor. Not only did it answer the question about what this particular UNC 3782 is, but it's telling us, hey, in the past 90 days, we found 7 indicators of compromise within the SecOps environment, okay, which are affiliated with these various synonyms for UNC 3782. So I'll do the same thing that we just did a moment ago in the first example, which is I'll click this button to jump us to the search. We'll see that Gemini populates a search. And as soon as the search is completed running, the Gemini summary will populate itself, and we can basically use this for more complex searches where there's tons of stuff being returned. The summary will be a lot more kind of useful to navigate that. For something simple like this, it's we know there's 7 events, and we can parse them, and there's basically little enough events to where we don't need the summary here to make sense of it. Okay, so let's just take a moment here to look at what we did so far. So we've ran 2 different queries. One of them, we asked Gemini to tell us point blank, is this threat actor active in the environment? We then pivoted to a second question where we asked it just to tell us more about a threat actor, and we saw that even for that question, it's going the extra mile and doing that search for us. Maybe when we asked this question about UNC 3782, maybe we didn't know, right? Maybe we don't know enough about the IOCs. Maybe we don't know enough about the environment. Maybe we weren't expecting those IOCs to exist. So based on the way that we asked the question, we were asking mostly just tell us some more information about the threat actor. But we see Gemini is actually not only doing that, but it's telling us, hey, by the way, these 7 different IOCs, they do exist in the SecOps environment. So again, 2 examples so far for applied threat intelligence, and I want to show you several more examples. So the third one that I'll run here is going to be associated with MITRE ATT&CK. So for those of us that are security practitioners, we probably live and breathe MITRE ATT&CK, right? So a fair question might be like you want to align with what the MITRE ATT&CK tactics for a particular threat actor are. I'm picking a different threat actor at this point. So the query that I'm going to run now is which MITRE ATT&CK techniques are associated with FIN7? Totally different threat actor, different type of a question. I'm going to run this too, and let's wait for Gemini's response to see what we get back here on this one. Again, conceptually, I'm framing the question differently, but ultimately, I'm still trying to get some kind of an insight about this particular threat actor in the context of the SecOps environment. Okay, so we'll scroll up to the top here, and I want to show you the kind of the meat of what I was asking is like, tell me about the MITRE ATT&CK techniques. So we have that broken down for us here, and Gemini is telling us, hey, FIN7 is associated with these particular MITRE ATT&CK techniques. Okay, and if we want to get down to the level of particular technique IDs within there, we have that option too. So within the summary, we have the associated technique IDs for those particular parts of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Okay, again, the same thing that we just saw for the first 2 examples. Not only is Gemini going to give us that additional sort of high-level info about the threat actor and what their techniques are, it's going to go ahead and run a search for us that's going to pull back IOCs, if any, for this threat actor. So it's telling us in the past 90 days, we found 23 indicators of compromise in your environment associated with, etc. This list of synonyms or associated malware with Bin7. So again, we have the list of domains here with their lasting timestamps, and I'll do the same thing that we just did for the earlier examples, which is jumping to the search, right? So again, this is a much more complicated search than the first two that we saw, and we don't have to populate any of it, right? It's just it's a bunch of hashes that it would take us some time to either reference these in like a reference list in SecOps or a table somewhere, or being able to put them in manually. So there's a certain level of kind of manual effort that that's being offloaded here. So when the search is completed running, we have the Gemini overview that's available to us, and I can click into the events tab to see what those associated events are, and be able to parse them from here. Okay. In this case, we not only did we have 116 events associated with that search, but we also had alerts associated with it too. So for those that for those that are navigating these types of alerts in SecOps, this would be something that got bubbled up to them. Okay, so far we've looked at 3 different queries, all of which are related to different threat actors. And we saw how not only do the queries return like taxonomy information about the different threat actors, like their synonyms, the tactics, etc., high-level info about the threat actor that we've pulled from threat intelligence, but it's also in all 3 cases, even without us asking it to, it's provided us a query that lets us hit the ground running and start to research the threat actor. So I'd like to jump into several more examples here, and we can take those one by one. Okay. So far, we've been using the Gemini pane to ask all of our questions. Instead, what I'd like to do this time is to show you yet another way that you can interface with Gemini, which is we call this like the natural language search bar. So directly above the query that I just populated here a second ago with Gemini, I'll close everything out here just to clean this out and start fresh. Directly above the search bar here in Sim, there's a smaller search bar here, which allows us to put some free-form text, right? It says, enter any question here. For example, and there's an example here with natural language. So this is an example of a place where we can provide a natural language query. The one that I'll run here is not particularly complex. So I'm saying, show me all failed logins for the past 3 days. Could we do this without a natural language search in SecOps? Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're familiar enough with the platform, maybe you already have this type of use case set up. You know, what I want to show you is in this scenario, you can start with some kind of a natural language query. Maybe it's not this particular one. Maybe it's one of the other ones that we'll see momentarily. But you can start with a natural language query, which it's not in UDM format, right? So it's not in UDM. It's just how we would speak. But when I select generate query, there's the associated query that's going to get populated here. Okay, a couple of things I want to show. The first thing is, the query itself gets populated, right? Easy enough. Like even if we didn't have, even if we didn't have the natural language search to help us, this might be something we could put together pretty easily. Okay. It also configures the time picker for us. So within our query, we said, show me all the failed logins for the past 3 days. So the associated time picker has been configured so that it's only looking for the past 3 days, and then we can run this, and if there's any associated events, they'll come back. Okay. So just a quick overview. What we did in this particular search is we started with a natural language query. So instead of running instead of populating this UDM search ourselves, we started with a natural language query, had Gemini generate it for us, and in this case, we just don't have any events that match it, which is fine. So here's another more interesting one. In this case, let's look at one that's a little bit more got a little bit more substance to it compared to this one. So the query that I'm now going to pass to it is show me lol bins for the past week. So for those that are familiar with these, you already know what lol bins are, but if not, so lol bin is a terminology that refers to living off the land binaries. So imagine conceptually, this is a scenario where a threat actor is leveraging some kind of a tool that's commonly present on a system natively. Maybe this is like the cert util binary in Windows, or maybe it's some other binary that's commonly associated, commonly available on a system, and we expect that binary to be there. And so a lull bin is like a scenario where a threat actor is able to leverage something like that for nefarious use. Like the tool itself is otherwise legitimate. We expect it to be there as part of the operating system and the system that we're working with. Okay, but actors are leveraging this tool in some nefarious way. So I've typed in the query, show me lull bins for the past week. I'll hit generate query, and let's see what Gemini gives us this time around. Okay. So again, towards the end of our query, we said, show me everything for the last week, right? For the past week. So the time picker gets updated accordingly, like we saw in the previous example. And in this case, now we've got a nice query here that again is pointing to these various different utilities that might be leveraged by a threat actor for a lull bin scenario. And yeah, lo and behold, like we got cert util in here as well. So like that example. So this is a way to put together a list of some of these commonly used binaries and have a search for us that approaches this from a threat intel perspective. Like, for example, I want to know if a threat actor is launching one of these particular utilities. The previous two queries that we just did have all been within the natural language search bar. So so far we've been doing it that way. All right. There's another example that I'd like to show you here, which is related to creating a rule. And so for this one here, let's switch back to the Gemini pane, and we could also do this within the natural language search too, or but in this case, let's go ahead. Let's start with the Gemini pane here, and what I'm going to select on the top right is I'm going to select new chat. This is optional. You don't have to necessarily create a new chat session every time you ask a question or anything like that. In fact, I didn't do that so far for the demo. But if you're in a scenario where you want to create a session that doesn't have any context from the previous questions that you're asking, you would just select the three dots on the top here and do a new chat. You also have the option to delete either this chat session or all of the existing chat sessions. So if I were to click, delete chat session here, you'll also see the option. You can also delete and reset all previous chat sessions. So I'll cancel this here, and the prompt that we're gonna use for this is, like, now we're after creating some kind of a YARA-L rule. So create a rule to detect logins from Bruce Wayne. I'll run this query here, and let's see what we get back. Now we're instructing Gemini, hey, I need your help to create a new YARA-L rule that didn't exist before. So it gives us what it thinks is the rule, and we'll as a SecOps user, it's our duty to kind of do the extra due diligence. Like, before we put this rule in place, we'll do some analysis on it to see, like, can we improve it somehow? Is there something that needs to be modified or changed or otherwise specified differently within the rule? So as operators of the platform here, we're going to be the ones that are ultimately determining whether or not these generated rules or these generated queries are hitting the mark for us. So Gemini is giving us the tools to be able to make this happen. Rather than expecting it to just give us the correct answer every time, it's more important for it to build out the process, the methodology, and the tools that are available to us to make this happen. Many times you might be in a scenario where you need to create a new YARA-L rule, like we just did, and maybe you need that initial jumping off point. So maybe you're just not sure how to start the rule. Maybe you're not sure exactly, like, what type of events you might have to target for that rule to be able to fire. So being able to use Gemini in this way is great, not because it's going to give you the correct rule every single time, or because it's gonna offset any manual work for the SecOps operator, but because it's giving us a way to start with something that is substantial, rather than starting from a blank slate. So we've got our YARA-L rule here, and I'm going to select Open in Rule Editor. Okay. What this is going to jump us to here is the rule editor within SecOps. we can see the associated YARA-L rule that Gemini gave us, and now it's our task to kind of do some analysis on this rule and see what can we change about it, right? What can we improve? What can we tweak? Is it hitting the mark? Is it missing something altogether? So this type of stuff, it's if you use SecOps on a regular basis, you're probably already used to doing all that. And so here's our YARA-L rule. We started with a natural language query in our Gemini pane here, and we ended up with pretty substantial YARA-L rule. Not the most complicated one that we could work with, but it might do the trick for what we need. So I have the option here to either discard the rule, save it, etc. That part is just the same like using the rule editor in any other context. Okay. So I'll discard this rule here, and let's start from the sim search. I'll back out here, back to the sim search from a fresh screen, and I wanted to do a quick summary of what we've looked at during this workshop. So basically, I showed how Gemini can be used within SecOps to streamline and to automate a lot of the ATI-oriented tasks that we might have to do as an operator of SecOps. So from an applied threat intelligence perspective, we know there's tons of this threat intel data out there. It's keeping up with it manually and being able to stay up to date on the latest and on the latest threat research from all the different vendors that are out there is quite challenging. So from a Gemini perspective, it's not only being trained on threat intel research that's making it easier for us to navigate these use cases, but in many cases, it's also taking it a step further and giving us pre-made components that we can use within SecOps. So it's giving us associated searches. It's searching for IOCs just from us asking for a particular info about a threat actor. It's creating a YARA-L rule for us when we ask it to, based on the characteristics. So depending on what you're trying to get out of the tool, and depending on what type of output you want, you want to be able to tweak these queries to get to that point. So if you find that, for example, you pass a query but you don't get back something quite like you expect, that's fine. It might mean that you either have to change the query a bit, or maybe you're thinking of the use case differently, and there's a kind of a different way to tackle the problem. My suggestion is always, use Gemini as a starting point if possible to offload the initial, like the scaffolding or the initial work that's related to creating these concepts. So, like if I need to create a YARA-L rule, or I need to create a UDM search, yeah, we can do that manually. And if we use SecOps, it's something that we're already used to using. But we might be in a scenario where we're in a crunch. We don't have time to be able to create that from scratch. Okay. Or we just need the inspiration. Like we need some way to give me an idea, Gemini, for how I could tackle this use case, or what the search might look like, what the rule might look like that's associated with it. So as far as demos are concerned, I ran through the ones that I had prepared here for everybody. And so I want to basically leave this by showing you some additional documentation that's available for Gemini. Okay. There's a lot more to this, right? So obviously we covered a few different use cases, but the sky's the limit as far as what you're going to be able to do within the platform yourself. So maybe the types of queries that you're going to be asking are fairly complex, maybe quite a bit more complex than the ones that I just showed you. That's fine. Please do so, and if depending on what type of response you get back from Gemini, feel free to rate it accordingly. So what I want to show you here is I've now pivoted to our documentation page for Google SecOps, and I'd like to show you that this page has all of the information that we covered here, plus more. So if you ever need to reference the meta information about the availability, or the basically like what is Gemini built on in SecOps, well, we talked about that, right? We talked about SecLM and how SecPalm is a component of SecLM and how it's trained on security blogs, etc. Okay. And if I scroll down just a tad here within the page here, we can see what are the key features of Gemini in Google SecOps. Okay, the first one is we can generate search queries. We saw that in action today. We saw that Gemini can create search queries for us, and we saw that it does this even if we're not necessarily asking it to directly. We might be just researching a threat actor, and it's going to do us the favor of creating these associated search queries. It can create YARA-L rules, which is the last example we saw where we generated a YARA-L rule for failed logins for Bruce Wayne. It can answer threat intelligence and security questions. We saw this in action, right? We asked it for information about multiple threat actors, and in our case, we asked it questions about threat actors that they've been around for a while, and there's history associated with them. Depending on which vendor you're working with, these threat actors might go by different names. So correlating all this disparate, threat intel data and being able to make actionable insights out of it, that's the crux of applied threat intelligence. And it's basically how Gemini helps us tackle that particularly complex use cases. So we can ask it questions about threat intelligence, and we can have this reasonable expectation that it's also going to help us with constructing these queries and these rules. You can also ask Gemini for documentation summaries. So it's trained on our Google Cloud documentation. So the same documentation corpus that I'm showing here, not necessarily just the Gemini page, right? But I'm talking the Google Cloud documentation as a whole. Let's say you have a question about Google SecOps, like you want to know about how to set up a forwarder or how to set up a data table, for instance. You can ask Gemini questions and you'll get documentation summaries. When you do this, you'll also get links to the relevant documentation as well as part of that. So it'll point you to the correct place in here where you can jump in and read more in-depth information. Many times what I find is that the summaries of the documentation that it provides, they do the trick as far as being able to answer the question. So maybe just off the cuff example is maybe you need help setting up a pub sub feed, or maybe you need help setting up a bind plane, for instance. Right? Whatever you can think of, you can ask it for assistance with summarizing documentations. Okay? You have the ability for it to create and edit playbooks. Okay? In this type of scenario, I would also recommend, again, use this as a jumping point. Use this as a way to get some kind of an initial product in front of us, so that we can then modify it and tweak it as fit. So creating and editing a playbook, that's a use case where maybe we can cover this on some other webinar down the line where we have a little bit more time. Okay, and to round this out, we covered what the Gemini case summary widget looks like. So this case summary widget is going to populate for each search that you run, and it's pending on the search being completed. So if you see the case summary spinning like it's still loading or something, it indicates that the search that you passed is still not completed. Like, in other words, we can't create the summary, right? Gemini cannot create a summary if the search isn't complete yet, right? We can't summarize it if we're still waiting for information to come back. So there's a number of things that we looked at so far, and it's been a blast running through them with everybody. As always, there's different ways that we could approach this, and it's like Gemini is something that's evolving and growing all the time, like on a daily basis. So as you use this, remember to utilize that feedback loop. So when you rate something as positive or negative, with a thumbs up or a thumbs down, you can provide the associated information about why you felt that way and sort of why the response was or was not something that hit the mark. So by doing this together, by leveraging this and providing that feedback together across all of us, that's how we improve these tools. So what we saw here is, what we saw today is Gemini in its current state. We can only imagine, right, that at some point down the line, it's going to be even better, and it's going to continue evolving and continue growing. And some of this is in our hands too, by using it and by providing that feedback loop. So I know I've covered a ton of stuff on our webinar today, and Matt, I just wanted to say thank you again for providing this resource and being able to have everyone here in one spot for the community. So it's been a pleasure. I know there's a bunch of other stuff that we can cover. Feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to write in the community too. And again, thank you everybody for your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's been amazing, Vasken. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really insightful. There are a few questions that I think you might be able to help answer. I noticed that there are a lot of folks in here answering for us. So thanks everyone on the side, on the Google side, helping to answer our webinar attendees' questions today. But one was, can you have it make a rule from a query you develop manually instead of doing everything in the prompt window? Do you happen to know that answer by chance?
So in this scenario, the use case is you have a query that you're starting off with, and you'd like to create a rule from that query, right? Like you instead of in starting this from like a discussion within the Gemini pane, you're basically starting with some query that you're providing, and you're asking it to create a rule, right? If that's the use case, then I'm understanding it. The way I would try this out is open up the Gemini pane and prompt it that way. So say for instance, here's my existing query, for instance. Okay. Based on this, can you create a rule? Okay. For that matter, I would also try it within the SecOps pane, like we were just seeing throughout our demo here. And then secondarily, if let's say if the response that you got back, it's not hitting the mark, or it's not what you expect, try it in Gemini, like outside of SecOps. Like try opening Gemini by itself and approaching it that way. Say, hey Gemini, I have a question related to Google SecOps. Okay, like we're giving it that context ahead of time, and here's the associated search, this UDM search that I want, and I'm looking to create some kind of a rule that's based on this search. Okay, that's how I would tackle this problem. Try it first within the pane, like we were seeing, the Gemini pane. Depending on what you get back, try it also within Gemini by itself, kind of standalone, separate from SecOps. Okay. If anyone else has ideas for that too, feel free to chime in. Thanks.
Great. I love it. I love it. And then I think you know this answer, but does Gemini use GTI?
Yes. Short answer is yes. So we have available to us the entire GTI threat intelligence corpus. So and more. So whatever type of threat intel that you see in GTI, definitely Gemini is going to leverage that. It'll be something that comes across. So short answer to that is yes.
Great. And then I think this was answered in there, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Will Gemini help us with composite rules?
Oh, great. Yeah. So composite rules were like a fairly recent development. So I haven't tried it yet. It would be a good thing if if someone on the call is willing to give this a shot. Feel free to write in the community, like write us a post, write us a response if you give it a shot. That's how I would do it. Composite rules are fairly new, so they're, for those that are not familiar with them, it's a way for us to basically leverage multiple detections for creating an alert. So it uses something called the detection store. So it's a little bit of a more complex way of creating alerts within SecOps, and it's a fairly new development. I haven't tried it yet, but I'd be willing to give it a shot and see how it works out. Yeah, try it out. Let us know.
Great. That's awesome. I think that's all the questions for today. If we miss any, we will post them to this community event where we host the webinar after we've recorded it to YouTube. But thank you everyone for joining today and all your engaged questions. A big thanks to Vasken for showcasing his knowledge of Gemini and SecOps. This has been incredible. Really appreciate everyone's time here, and we look forward to seeing you in the community. Please come and test out Gemini in your SecOps environment and let us know what you're coming up with. That's how we learn together, right? By understanding what you're experiencing and the solutions and rules that you're coming up with. Would love to learn and see what you guys are coming up with and showcasing your expertise too. So round of applause, everyone. We will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.